Okay, we are live.
Good evening. I am now calling the Reimagining Public Safety, Transparency, and Accountability Working Committee together and calling it to order. First, I would like to have a motion. Well, all members are present. I can see them, Shamus and Phil. So all members are present. And I'd like to have a motion to approve September 30th Working Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right, this evening we have Susan Hudson, president of NACO, and independent police auditor for New Orleans. Is that gentleman here, Shamus?
Yeah, I think Susan's here. I had spoken with Susan in August, and just really appreciated her perspective, and especially since we heard from the folks at NACOL last week about their 13 principles of effective oversight. I thought it'd be helpful just to hear from her, and particularly about her experience in New Orleans. And I believe she spent the last 10 years in New Orleans as the monitor. And then also before that was in Austin, Texas and Los Angeles. So
Wow.
thought it'd be helpful to have her perspective. So Susan, take it away.
Take it away, Susan.
Okay. Well, first of all, good evening, I guess it is there.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to speak with you all. I apologize for being in my car because I was trying to make it home but could not in the traffic. So, but still glad to speak with you. Excited about you reviewing oversight and trying to help my friend Phil out and make something that's strong and wholesome and effective and community driven. So those are all things that are near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad to be here. Did you want to ask me questions? Do you just want me to talk? I know I can talk, but that might be, that might doom your meeting.
Sure. Well, I think, Ginger, I'll defer to you, but I think, last week we talked about, the importance of staffing and budget, and also, some of the reports that you guys have done. I know that, particularly New Orleans. So hearing about sort of how the progression has been over time, because I think the office has evolved over time, that might be helpful.
Right. Okay. And can you hear me okay?
Yes. Do you want to first start out by just telling us a little bit about how you got where you are as far as doing this type of work?
Yeah, so it was a journey for me. So I was I'm a Texas lawyer, and I started out as a defense counsel, and then I moved on to be a prosecutor. And as a young defense counsel and young prosecutor, I saw all kinds of police misconduct and didn't really know what to do about it. And because as a defense counsel, you're trying to get the best deal you can or best results you can for your client. And as a prosecutor, you're working for a victim a lot of times. So it's just very difficult. And oversight was not something on my radar at all at that time. In fact, NACOL hadn't been around very long at that time. So then I started working in the city attorney's office, I used to try the appeals for discipline for all city employees, but especially police and fire, who had arbitrators and had a special way of being investigated by internal affairs. And that's how I got familiar with this whole industry. And then as Shema said, I went to Austin to work full time in this business. And then I went to LAPD and then here to New Orleans because I had the consent decree experience from LAPD. And they knew that the city was about to enter a consent decree. The Justice Department was on its way. So that's how I ended up getting into this field. And it really just has suited me a lot. I tried a lot of different areas of the law, but this one was right on time because I feel like it's doing good work. It's community driven work. It's about harm reduction. All these things that we're talking about now that I really didn't have voice to, and that we're in this special time right now in our country's history, we have a chance to really make some big changes and really have some effective oversight and and to have democratic policing, something that's really organic and community led. So I'm excited. So my experience has brought me here to New Orleans, and now being the president of NACOL, and I ran as the president of NACOL because I started out here in New Orleans with basically nothing. I think I was alone for a while, and I think the largest we had was 3 people to look at 1,600 cops. And we just could not do it all with all that was going on. The New Orleans Police Department was shooting people at a very high rate for their size. We had to cover those first, but then also take complaints, monitor, review, work on policies, procedures, all that with 3 people. And so it was just really, really tough. In addition to that, we didn't have access to all the information that we needed to do our job. When our office was originally created, we had subpoena power through the larger organization we were a part of. Once we separated from them in a vote of the people in 2016 and became independent, an independent organization, our funding was secured in our city's charter, our independence was secured in the charter, the structure, but our subpoena power did not come with it. And so that access is the last piece of the puzzle for us. If you really want to know what's going on, you have to have access to this information. I'll give you an example. About 3 weeks ago, a member of the community called me and said, this police officer is having an inappropriate relationship with a minor. So our community trusted us. They did not trust to go to the police. They trusted to come to us, and they came to us to get the ball rolling because they knew we would do something with it, and we did. But now the second part of that is, what was occurring with this officer's history? Did they have knowledge about, or at least warning signs about this officer previously? Well, to get access to the early warning system and the information I need to see if the city was properly monitoring and handling this officer, I'm going to have to work to get that access. I don't have it right now. Those are key information that could affect people's lives. So we've been fighting for that access for several years now. What if we could have had this many years ago and been able to audit this appropriately and make sure that they're being consistent and fair and effective in their oversight of their own officers? So we've fixed a number of things, but it took a while to get there. From 2010 to 2016 to fix the structure and to secure the funding. And we're still working on securing all the access that we need. But this is really the time to do that. Oversight matters. It makes a difference. There are studies now that show that. Usman Ali has put out two studies recently, and he's at the University of Indiana. And he put out 2 studies recently that show that strong and effective oversight can influence racial profiling, bringing it down, can influence the number of officer-involved shootings in which the officers are shooting members of the community. And another key one is that it lessens the number of times that officers are killed. So those are all 3 huge things, 3 huge lightning points or lightning rods for our community. So effective oversight can really influence those 3 data points and impact folks' lives. So, but it really needs to be resourced and structured from a place of strength.
You talked about the challenges with access of information that was needed. How much support have you gotten from like the New Orleans Police Department in your role?
It's a great question. Well, you just went right to the heart of it, right? So the police department has obstructed my access to information over these 10 years. I've had to work really hard to get there under 2 different chiefs. The current chief, who has been there since I believe to the beginning of 2019, is much more open and is getting me much more access to information, but I'm still missing just a few things. The prior chiefs really restricted it to information because they were, I think, also afraid, and because as you probably know, police data is historically inaccurate. And you need to have eyes on it to check the accuracy of it. If you look at NYPD or the smallest police department in the country, cops are good at being cops. They're not great at inputting data and inputting information all the time. And so that data can a lot of times be inaccurate. And so our police department was afraid of us getting in there and getting a look at this data and putting this data out. And so they fought us a lot of times about that instead of working with us so that we could audit them and help them be better at collecting and inputting data so that the data is useful to all who need it. Most recently, this new chief, who's I said has been there a little under 2 years, our city council has put up forth a resolution for our office to house and maintain a public facing database of information. Lots of information that we need a lot of access to information to put together. And so right now the negotiations are kind of ongoing. The police say they're for it. So we'll see, but it just really kind of depends on the issue. Access to the early warning system is a huge one. Our ordinance mentions the early warning system 4 times, but that is something that the police department has fought tooth and nail on. And I'm not really sure what that's about, to be honest with you. But it's such a key piece of the puzzle that we have to have access to it. So we're going to continue that fight.
Okay.
So it depends.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions they want to ask?
Sure, Ginger. I have a couple. Susan, when you talk about staffing and budgeting, I know that over time that's increased. And I believe you had mentioned to me that you had, 7 or 8 people, I believe, and a budget of about $1 million. And, for comparison, I think Akron is about 200,000 people and New Orleans City of about 400,000 people. What have you been able to do with regard to, with that additional staff, with regard to the additional funding that you weren't able to do before, and particularly, with regard to some of these reports that you're able to take deep dives, and particularly with regard to community engagement? Because I think a lot of it is kind of sharing the story of what the department is doing and, trying to get some of that transparency.
Oh, great question, Shamaz. And I got to tell you, it's been awesome just watching us grow over this time period. So we went from about $450,000 to $1.16 million this year. Well, it was $1.16 million before COVID hit. So it's probably going to be just close to $1 million after, the city's revenues haven't come all the way fully through. So that's huge. So we had to prioritize. And our number one function was always to look at critical incidents, which are officer-involved shootings, in custody deaths, those situations that can cause a city to literally burn to the ground. Those were number one. And those are always number one, given the history of what happened here around Katrina, and not wanting that to happen on my watch, where we have cover-ups and shootings and so on and so forth. So we always prioritize that. And that was number one. And so even before the consent decree kicked in, we were able to help drop those numbers. We went from around 20 or so per year, 22, and they started falling immediately, that we started monitoring and watching and reviewing these cases. Once the consent decree kicked in, it continued.
Frozen. Sarah.
Let's see. Ms. Hudson, if you can hear me, if you want to try to leave the meeting and come back in, sometimes that helps.
We can play the Jeopardy music while we wait.
My apologies. Not sure exactly what happened. Should I just continue or?
Sure.
Okay. And so, those incidents, critical incidents, were always number one. We had to deprioritize everything else. Number one was taking complaints from our community. We knew that people didn't always feel safe with the police department and wouldn't always speak to the police department. So that was those are our number one, number one duties were to cover those incidents and monitor them and make sure there was no cover-ups. And number two, hear from our community and find out what's going on, because they knew what officers were doing. And remember, the New Orleans Police Department was super corrupt. The Justice Department called certain parts of their functions the aorta of corruption here. So that's how bad it was. And so we had to prioritize those, but everything else had to fall by the wayside. Being able to get more information out to the community, you need people who can do that work full time. The times that I've had a full-time community relations director / media / social media person are the times that the community we hear most from the community, because they know we're here. They know we're here. They know we're working. They know how to reach us. You have to continually invest in the community and letting them know what you're doing and where you're at. And when I don't have that, like right now, I'm down one person because we couldn't hire back because of the budget crisis now. And so I'm down a community relations / media person. So we're kind of suffering from that a little bit. It's super important for the community to know about the oversight function, how to reach them, and what they're doing for them. That's super important. And then, so as we've grown, then I've been able to have sections and focus on things. So not only do we take complaints, but we monitor disciplinary hearing. A lot of times officers had huge disciplinary histories, but weren't even being disciplined. They had 30 complaints and 1 or 2 suspensions with 30 complaints. So we had to start getting involved in monitoring disciplinary hearings and looking at complaints and checking histories and so on and so forth. And so, as we get bigger, the more that we can do. The last piece of the puzzle for us will be a full-time auditor, full-time data person, and rehire back my full-time media person. Because right now I have 2 people in complaints. I will have 2 people in use of force as soon as we bring one more person on board, and that we're able to kind of cover our caseload there, because you've got to do the work to be able to make the recommendations, do the policy work, etc. And then I've got administrative help. I've got contractual data help, but I would love a full-time data person who can just, if there's something hot going on in your community right now, say, here the issue is about use of force after there was a tear gas incident. I'd love to be able to put something out about the use of tear gas over the years, or the use of force over the years, something that's relevant to what the conversation is right then and there. So that's super important as well for me. So money makes the difference. Money makes the difference. If you don't properly secure personnel resources and training for your oversight, they have to run the risk of being burnt out, but then also just not being able to get to all the critical work they need to do.
Susan, and another point that you had made to me was, that sometimes the office functions as a liaison between victims and the department, and also that it assists with mediation, and also takes complaints from officers. Can you talk a little bit about those functions?
Yeah. So one of the things that I discovered here, whereas I didn't have this issue in Austin so much, and I didn't hear it so much in Los Angeles either, lots of complaints and people coming to us saying, I was a victim of crime and I didn't get good police services. And so that's not traditional oversight, right? So it's usually about racial profiling, uses of force, etc. So we decided, the traditional complaint process does not work for victims of crime. They need problem solving and solution. And so we reached out to the police department. We said, hey, look, if there is not clearly identifiable misconduct and or no threat, nobody's being hurt, anything of that nature, we'll reach out to a supervisor, tell them what the community member has told us, what help they need, and then we'll work with the police department to find a solution. So a lot of times that could be a homicide victim's family, and they don't know what's going on in their case. It's gone cold. They haven't had their questions answered. We'll get in touch with the supervisor, get the investigator, get specific questions from the family. And I don't care if it's 1 million questions. We want the police department to answer all of them. Get them to have that dialogue with the police department so that, as you can imagine, these families are wearing their grief, their hurt to no end. And let's don't exacerbate that. Let's do something for them to help them. If I file a complaint and the complaint comes back unfounded, nobody's going to be helped by that. So we developed this liaison work, and it's not just good for our community, it's very rewarding because we're helping people who've been hurt. So it's really important for us. So that's our liaison work. We have a mediation program. It's part of our ordinance, but in 2013 and 14, we put together a community committee, which included 2 of the 3 police unions, members of my oversight, members of the city council, and then grassroots folks who wanted to be, and professors, whomever. I think there was about 30 people in it. And we had somebody who was an expert in mediation who volunteered her time to bring research to them. And they took their time and went through every single aspect of mediation and decided what was best for our community. So it was community put together. They made those recommendations to me and to the chief of police, and we agreed with those and put the program into place. And it's a program that I run, our office runs, but the mediators are from our community. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to have had anything to do with mediation before. All you have to do is be impartial and be willing to come be a part of your. And so we train them, 50 hours of training to get started, and then another 20 hours per year. We pay them a little stipend for the mediations, and our community sits down with community members who are aggrieved and the officers who have been complained on, and they work out solutions together. All they have to do is have a real conversation and to talk. That's it. And we get over 70% of the community loves it, and usually in the 90s with the officers, because there's an incentive, of course, in it for them. But the conversations are almost always about race, and they're deep conversations. And they'll start off with screaming and yelling sometimes, and our mediators bring it back to dialogue and solution. We see people hug each other, exchange phone numbers, officers who agree to go to church with people, whatever the case may be. It's just really community driven, and I love it. So that's mediation. And then you also asked about what was the last
taking
thing?
Taking complaints from officers.
Officers. Yeah. So one thing we know about the complaint system is that it will not properly function if people are afraid to use it. And whether they're the community or police, we don't care. We want the system to be fair to all. Not only when we review a complaint do we review the investigation to see if the officer's Bill of Rights was violated, if any other rights of the officer were violated, etc. We look at a system that functions properly for all. But if I remember, we had a summit, I believe it was 2013, we had a summit that included police and community who wanted to fight against retaliation, because we've had some horrible retaliation here historically. And we were able to have that summit, good dialogue. And what the community and officers told us is somebody has to intervene. Somebody has to intervene when we're afraid and when we're being retaliated against. Somebody has to intervene or we won't speak up in the future. And so we've worked with internal affairs to do that, especially as to officers, but also as to community members. If I have a community member who calls me and says, hey, I just got arrested after I filed a complaint, you can best believe I'm calling the chief right then and there. There's gonna be a problem. So those are good processes we've worked out. And this year we've had a huge number of internal complaints from both officers and civilian employees in our police department coming to us to tell us that there's misconduct afoot there in the department. So it's huge. If you're going to really reform a system, you have to have the people who are working on the front lines be involved.
Thank you. One thing we've talked about in our meetings is, there are a lot of these processes in place, like the early warning system. The sergeants here in patrol work with Phil, and sometimes in the same mediation that you're describing. But the one thing that seems to be coming back is that this can be a mechanism of community trust, and that no matter what processes are in place, you can have the best department in the world or problems. It helps that the community knows that there's someone who's able to watch a check that can be a check and a bridge. Do you think that's right?
Oh, absolutely. We have a big cultural economy here. The Mardi Gras Indians, the musicians, street performers, you name it. And there was an issue came up about performers being able to perform during COVID. We just held this weekend conversations between musicians and the police, and we're going to hold some more coming up, including with the chief of police, to work out solutions so that the musician can earn a living, because everybody's struggling right now, but also our city can be safe and not spread this horrible disease. So those are the situations we live for, where we are, and we don't care what the issue is. We tell people, if you have a question, a concern, a commendation about your police department, you can reach out to us and we'll help you with it. We will like to bridge the gap between our community and the police, if there is one. And sometimes we just enhance it when there is good, already communication. We just try to make it better. So.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I had.
Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Baylor, I'm not sure if you can see the hand being raised, but
I cannot.
Councilwoman Amobian has her hand raised.
Okay, Councilwoman Amobian, go ahead.
Thank you. Susan, I was not able to join initially. Are you a prior officer?
No, I'm not. I was telling them I'm an attorney by trade. I'm a former defense attorney, former prosecutor, and former assistant city attorney.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, all you're saying is good information. That's a huge budget when we think about Akron, Ohio. But I do believe that we need help. There's no question about that. And I realize that you put your money where your mouth is if you're serious about doing this work. So I'm not saying that we don't need to do it, but we certainly do. I don't know, did Shamas explain to you where we are now, and in terms of one person doing everything and probably not getting very much done?
Well, I've known Phil for a long time. And so I see him once a year and get to chit chat with him. I didn't know all of his business, but I know Phil being a good guy and being in the work. But I also know being a solo person, trying to look at all the things that you have to look at is really, really tough. And so if you are a solo person trying to do all that, you have to rely on relationships to try and get things done. But when the police don't want to enhance those relationships, and I don't know what's going on there, I do not. I'm just telling you from my experience, when police don't want to work with you, it makes it a little bit difficult. But I also wanted to just, if I can, real quick, if you wouldn't mind.
I think my remark was a little flippant. Maybe done, but here's the problem. When you can't get information, you can't get all the details of what you need. You can't get it immediately. And, I can't tell you how many complaints I've gotten from citizens who feel not being heard.
Yes.
And I think there's only so much he can do as a solo person. That's right. And we talked about this when I came on council some 11 years ago. But again, it sounds like he's now opening up and saying what he's not able to get. because over the years, we've certainly asked him. And as you said, he's probably trying to develop relationships and salvage those that he has developed in the police department and doesn't want to ruin them. So certainly you won't tell council members a whole lot in terms of what you're not able to get. And that's kind of where we've been over the years, not being able to find out exactly what is happening over here.
I understand. There's probably a lot I don't know about what's going on there. Just kind of the generalities of what happens all around the country with oversight, which is the same. And I'm really excited about this time period where we have the opportunity to really put the strength, the resources, and the effort that we need into oversight, because we know it does work and it can be effective when properly, resourced, etc. And I guess you guys spoke to our staff and all about the information we've been gathering about effective practices and all that information.
Can we go on your website and see some of this, or is it available?
It should be on NACOLE's website, nacole.org. And it's the 13 principles and then also effective practices of oversight. We've got some handouts about that and just some information about models of oversight, which is really a community thing. What does your community really want? But whichever model you pick, there's just certain powers and authorities and things that all of them need to really be effective. So,
That's frozen again.
Yes. Frozen.
I can see that Councilman Lombardo has his hand raised.
Okay, Councilman Lombardo, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if Susan can hear because the question's for her.
Looks like she's back.
And if she's frozen. Oh, okay. Hi,
okay,
Susan.
I wondered what happened. It got kind of quiet. Sorry about that.
That's
Hi,
okay.
Susan. My name is Phil Lombardo, and I'm councilman here in Ward 2. But you were saying when people of the city have problems with the police, they call you or your organization. So in my 10 months of being as councilman, I mean, they call me basically on the same thing sometimes as if they didn't get a response from the police department when they called for this matter or that matter. And I realize everybody is stretched, and obviously the police, had, they prioritize their calls. I'm sure maybe they were at an accident, maybe they were at another call where shots were fired, so they're not really going to come and for some minor incident, so to speak. So the question is how well do you guys interact with your council people?
I'll say that, first of all, thank you for that question. And I'll say this, it's depending on the council itself. So when I got here, it was a little bit more of a nuance. They were like, oh, this is new. Let's see what we're doing here. Very supportive. But once I started, critiquing the police and critiquing them pretty solidly, there were some issues. We've had some changes in council members. This current council is very supportive, very progressive, and very reformist, and very community oriented. So they recently, in June 18th, sponsored a resolution for us to have this public facing database of complete police officers' histories, uses of force, summaries, just a ton of information about what's going on in the police department. They banned tear gas a couple of weeks ago after an incident we had on the bridge. They are working on parity for public defenders, funding for public defenders. So just a very reformist board. And so that works right in with what we're trying to do, which is lessen the police footprint on our city. And like many other cities are doing, trying to find alternative ways to respond to community issues that don't really require police, such as children or folks with addiction, folks with mental health concerns, so on and so forth. So they're very supportive of that currently. And that's very helpful, right? Because ultimately, I don't have those authority over the police department like they do.
Now, Councilwoman Omobian was saying about how, they're unable, like as a community, how we're unable to break through in some areas. When you encounter situations like that, what do you do to try to, break that barrier that may be between the community and the police department? I mean, when you get that resistance, like you said, they didn't want to work with you. What things did you do to try to impact that to where you can, at least get something started?
Oh, that's a great question. A great question from the council member. Sorry, I cut out and didn't hear it earlier. You always have, I'm just going to say this in my experience, 16 years in police oversight, you have got to say it multiple times before it finally catches hold in the police department. They think at first you're just doing something to spite them almost, or busy work. I really don't always understand why there's resistance, but they don't always understand it. And it takes me saying it several times and having discussions in private as well, so that they can understand where I'm coming from. I'll give you an example. I came to New Orleans from LAPD, and the first thing I said is, our officers are so unsafe. Your tactics are horrible. You're putting officers in danger. We've got to do something about this right now. Training right now. We had 8 officers shot within a certain time period. And so I was like, we just have to do something about it. Well, they looked at me like I was speaking a different language. Maybe Martian or something. They were just like, what are you talking about? I had to say it over and over again. I recruited the FBI to help. I recruited other partners to look at this. I asked the people that I used to work with at LAPD, who are cops, to get in touch with them. I just tried everything possible to get them to understand. And if that doesn't work, and it doesn't always work, now I'm going community, and I'm going to ask my community to push it through. And so I'm going to talk about why it's important to them, and I'm going to talk to them about it. And I'm going to be very vocal, because there's only so much negotiating and trying to work with folks that you can do.
Okay, thank you.
Ginger,
Yeah,
I had a question.
I'm sorry.
I had a question. If you,
Okay, go ahead.
Susan, going off of Councilwoman Amobian's point, one of the things I think, at least I've seen here, is that, there is a fair amount of, I think Phil and the department often work well together, but some of the breakdown seems to be in that, there's no statute that sets out the authorities and the responsibilities and the access, right? And so, also I think Phil's on the call as well, so if he wants to jump in as well on this point. But it seems like having that defined and having clear, pathways and expectations, and also, there are some concerns about confidentiality and other types of things like that. Having those processes in place and defined expectations on both sides seems really important. Do you think that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. And hi, Phil. I can't see everybody on my phone, but hello, Phil. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have that. You know what, though? I'm going to tell you this. Almost every single ordinance about oversight around the country has a section in it that says anybody who doesn't cooperate with oversight is going to be held accountable. No one is ever held accountable for not cooperating with oversight in the police department. It is important for council to work with the mayor. It's important for the people who make the decisions to put the hammer down when needs be. I didn't mention this, but at different times, I didn't buy a house. I'm gonna be kind of personal here. I didn't buy a house in New Orleans for 6 years because I was always in danger of being removed for being outspoken and for doing my job. You have got to make sure that the authorities are written down, that the person is secure except for misconduct or for other reasons. Anything having to do with misconduct, but you've got to make people be secure for doing their jobs. That's one of the most important parts of these ordinances. Authorities, so that so that when Phil goes to the community and says, yes, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, this is what I'm X, Y, and Z, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's right there in the law backing him up. It's super important.
Phil, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in as well.
Yes. Hey, Susan, how are you?
Good, Phil.
Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to ask a question about the early warning system. What do you have? Is it the IA Pro?
No, IA Pro was our system for the first, I think, 6 years. I think probably around 2017 or 18, they instituted something called Insight, which is a feeder system that they feeds in complaints, uses of force, pursuits, whatever is. There are about 12 things mentioned in the consent decree, and so it feeds all that data in, and then there are thresholds, and when an officer has, too many thresholds for his or her particular assignment, and they hit that threshold, it will signal, and then the supervisors are supposed to look at it and then make some type of assessment about what's necessary. One of the complaints we get from officers is not everybody's treated consistently or fairly. So that's another reason we want to get into this system and see how well supervisors are doing. But this system is, I don't believe it's homemade. I believe they purchased it, but it's called Insight.
Okay, thank you.
What would that do, Phil?
Pardon me?
What would that system do for us? I'm just trying to understand what you're asking.
I don't know what that system is. We currently have IA Pro, but we haven't really put it online totally, and that it will pump out different things that we're looking at, such as complaints, use of force, and things like that. But we haven't completed the procedure to actually act on those things.
And I just wanted to jump in. One of the things we talked about was having OPSA, our internal affairs, come in and hopefully at the next meeting give us a walkthrough through IA Pro and that software in a generic way that doesn't share certainly officer information. But I think that the way the process is supposed to work, where I think it's very similar to this Insight in that it triggers yellow and red versus certain thresholds and certain metrics, and I think that it's helpful to know that process. I think that process is online, but also I think it would be helpful to have someone who's able to access that from outside the department as well.
Is that a tool that supervisors use to assess their workers or provide information about their workers? Is that what?
Yeah, I think supervisors are able to see their staff. I don't know if our liaisons want to weigh in at all either, but I think the supervisors are all able to see their staff and able to see, if there's an issue, they can talk to people in advance. It's not necessarily about punishing people, but about saying this may be an opportunity for extra training, or this may be just checking in. Maybe someone has seen too many critical incidents and seen, a couple of deaths or sensitive things.
Councilwoman Baylor, another question, please.
Yes, you may. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Susan, now are you under a decree, a court order?
The New Orleans. I'm sorry. I cut you.
Is that how your position was created?
No, our position. Our office was created by a vote of the people in 2008, and it opened.
People? The voters voted this in.
That's correct. After Katrina, when it became clear all the misconduct that had occurred and the number of killings that had occurred that were wrong, and that the justice and the community was going to Washington and asking the Department of Justice to come in, the communities sat down, the predominantly white business community and the Black community sat down and worked together to strengthen the different oversights here in our city. And the Business Council wanted the Office of Inspector General, which looks for fraud, waste, and abuse and that type of thing, money issues, to be strengthened. and the Black community wanted a police monitor, so they worked together, and the community had the vote. So I think the community would have gotten the signatures to get it on the ballot anyways, but the city council saw that, community wanted it and were able to put it on the ballot, and over 71%, I believe, of the community voted for our office to be created. So prior to the consent decree.
So did it come with a percentage of your budget that had to be assigned to this, or how did the budget get determined?
So it came, when we were created as a part of the Office of Inspector General. And there are three ethics entities. There's our office, the police monitor, there's the Office of Inspector General, and over us is the Ethics Review Board. So the three ethics entities get I believe it's 0.75 of 1% of the city's general fund.
Okay.
In 2016, when we gained independence, that 0.75 of 1% was split up between the three entities. So now we get 0.16 of 1%. The Inspector General gets 0.4 something, and the Ethics Review Board gets 0.04%. So the second vote, which was 73% of the community, voted to give us that 0.16 of 1%, which works out to roughly 1% of the police department's budget right now. But 2% would be better.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Baylor, I can see that Lieutenant Brown has his hand raised.
All right, go ahead, Lieutenant.
Yes, I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to hope that there's no comparisons between the New Orleans and the City of Akron Police Department, because there is no comparison in that regard. I realize you have some special challenges down there that luckily for the citizens of Akron, we don't face here in our community. Now, Phil Young mentioned about IA Pro and the early warning system, and we showed Councilman Malik this today and spoke with him briefly on it. And yes, the procedure for this early warning system has not been completed at this point. I mean, it's done, but we're waiting for some approval, but we're not waiting for that procedure to be completed. We are already taking steps as we've had an early warning system in the city of Akron since the 90s, if I can remember. Now it's run through this IA Pro program that we have. And when we get an alert on an officer or a certain officer meets a threshold, we immediately notify that officer's supervisor, who will then look at the threshold and determine if there's anything that needs to be addressed. So I just don't want it to, we've got this in place and nobody's doing anything with it. We certainly are already taking proactive steps to use the system to its fullest capability. That's why I wanted to offer that. We already have early warning processes in place.
Councilwoman Baylor, if I could jump in quickly.
Go ahead, Shamus.
Yeah,
about 10 minutes.
Sure. Going off of that point, one of the things that I also discussed with Sergeant Spano and Sergeant Kapler was two of the other programs, LEFTA, which I think tracks the field training officer interactions with the trainees and screens for racial bias in those interactions, and also the citizen contact log that tracks all citizen interactions and again looks at those for bias and creating bias-free policing. And so I was hoping that all three of these programs that we can hopefully set up walkthroughs at the next meeting on the 28th. But if either of the sergeants want to just speak to those at all, I think that it helps. In my mind, having the software in place, having those programs in place is great, but some of the data transparency in terms of making sure the public is aware of them, and also that the public maybe can view some of that summary data would be really helpful.
Would anyone like to speak to that?
Okay.
Are you speaking of the data from the citizen contact logs? Is that the data that you refer to? Because that is
Yeah, the citizen contact log and the LEFTA training software.
maybe one of my colleagues here can speak to the LEFTA software that I don't deal with, but and on the data for the citizen contact logs.
Okay, does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, this is Sergeant Kapler. I can step in here and answer your questions on or explain some of that to you.
Okay.
A number of years ago, well, first of all, I would like to explain to Ms. Hudson that, we are not under a consent decree here, nor have we been under one. But a number of years ago, we started, and probably close to 20, I'm not sure how many exactly, doing citizen contact logs. So it's right on our police MDBs. So anytime we stop somebody, we record their age, their race, their gender, the reason for the stop, and the outcome that transpired from that, whether warned and released, arrested, citation, etc. We did that not because we were asked to. We did that on our own accord to make sure that us as officers and as a department are engaging in bias-free policing. So that's one of the proactive things. And like Lieutenant Brown mentioned, I'm very proud of the fact that we are proactive here. We've adopted a number of programs, and the most recent one is our LEFTA program for our new recruits and trainees. And this is the first class. We just graduated a class of officers, and we're recording all their FTO data points in there, their gradings as the new recruits are coming out. But as part of that, we can also look in there and we can look and see how each recruit is being graded and how that pans out related to gender, age, and race. And so to make sure that we're giving all our recruits an equal opportunity here in the department, and we're also training in a bias-free manner. So we look at ourselves not only externally, but internally as well. Now, obviously, we have very limited data on that because this is our first recruit class and they're not even through their FTO training program. But looking at that the other day, I poked my nose in there and kind of looked through to see, and I saw no statistically significant deviations across any of those markers. Now, obviously, as we get more and more classes that run through this program, that data will become more rich, and we'll be able to look at it and see, do we have any training issues or issues that we need to address?
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hudson.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's fantastic. I just had two questions about those programs. Number one, how transparent are they? Are they available for the community? The community law, it's kind of like a stop and frisk log, basically. I forgot what the sergeant called it, but are you sharing that information with the community and is still able to audit it? Those are my two questions on that, because they're huge issues. I love the data collection and using that to be better. That's exactly, and not having to be asked to do that. That's huge. So just kudos to the department on that. But then the second thing being how transparent it is for community oversight, and then also for Phil to be able to audit it. One thing we found from our log here is that there were some issues with how it was created and how it collected information. And so we were able to help our police department to make it more accurate as if you're going to be doing analysis and stuff from it. So those would just be my two questions. But great.
Okay, anyone want to take that on?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
I can address that. Obviously, anything we collect is public records and can be assessed by anybody through a public records request. I know on the citizen contact logs, I believe one of our local universities, Kent State University, requested that information at some time and did a study on that. And also our local newspaper here, the Akron Beacon Journal, also requested that information and did a news story on that related in regarding to that. So As far as what do we share, obviously we share with Phil Young every one of our completed uses of force packages, every one of our completed complaint packages he gets. He gets monthly updates on all of our breakdown of use of force numbers, our breakdowns of complaint numbers, not only monthly, but he gets them on an annual basis as well. We put them up on our Akron PD website for the public to view. So anybody can go to their public, to our website and look at our use of force numbers and our complaint numbers. That is updated monthly. So we are very, try to be open and honest in that regard with the community.
If I can just go off of that also briefly, Councilwoman Bailey.
Look, we lost her. She's coming back in though.
Okay.
Just to briefly piggyback while we're waiting on Sergeant Kapler, I just wanted to say that the data I received today is our complaints are down 50% this year, and our use of force are down 12% this year. Those are some really good accomplishments for our agency.
And just to further just make one point off of the question from Ms. Hudson, I mean, I think, you know, the sophistication of the software that I think we have is really, I think, really impressive, and something that I think I didn't know about, and that I think most community members don't know about. And I think, you know, the point about data transparency is really helpful, and I think that's where I see you know, if Phil's office had 3 people in it, and a budget to accompany that, really a lot of talking about that and making that available and figuring out how to make that available could be done out of that office in my mind.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the core tenets of oversight is the transparency part. So agreed.
Miss Hudson, while you're still on the line, I did have a question for you, and I'm sure it really doesn't compare, but I know here in the city of Akron, we average probably a use of force for about 1 in every 1,100 calls for service, which is less than 1/10 of 1% of our calls for service that end up in a use of force. And when it comes to complaints, I think it's about 1 in every 3,700 calls for service ends up in a complaint. So I don't know how that compares with your agency. I was kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't. That's actually a great question, Sergeant. I don't have that for you. I know that complaints have cut in half since I got here in 2010. So we went from, I think, a little over 1 complaint per officer, or around 1,600 at the time, to around 800 or so, 850 or so last year. And our office actually took 1/8 of the complaints last year, one of the largest percentages we've ever taken. So the number of complaints we take is going up. The number of complaints the police department takes is going down. Same thing on use of force. I don't know the numbers per call or for service. I don't have that in front of me. Could certainly get that for you, but I don't have it in front of me. But I know that uses of force have also, after going up in 2014 due to the way they reported them, we have around 500 or so incidents per year, which could involve more than one type of force, so around 1,500 types of force per year. And that's been falling over the last couple of years as well. So around 500 incidents, 1,500 individual uses of force, but that has been going down steadily. So complaints and uses of force have been going down. Yeah, our police department was the worst in the country when I got here in 2010. They had earned that rank, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to take this time before we talk about what we're going to have going on our next meeting. I'd like to thank you, Susan Hudson, for your input and for being with us today and sharing with us a lot of good information, a lot of things to glean from. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you too, Phil Young. Thank you for your work in the community and everything that you do and your perseverance, and you're still hanging in there. So hopefully, you'll get some help and on both sides, and we can continue to do the good work that you've already started. Lieutenant Chris Brown, thank you. Been a very good source of information and keeping us abreast of things that are going on in the department. I have some other things that I want you to bring some information about our next meeting. And you too, Sergeant Kapler, thank you so much for sharing and being on with us from each time that we have our meetings, and also Sergeant Ralph Spano. Okay, so with that being said, Ms. Hudson, if you want to,
Thank you.
leave the call, you may do so. Thank you very much for your time. I try to be mindful of everyone's time and try to keep it within an hour. So
Thank you all
you,
for
and
having me.
all right, and take care and drive safe.
Anytime you
Thanks
need anything,
again,
please let me
Susan.
know. Thank you,
Okay.
Thanks
Siobhan.
again, Susan.
You all well.
Hit
Hey,
'em
Phil.
straight.
All
Hit 'em
righty.
straight.
Okay, so next step, Shamas, you got a couple people for the 28th, I heard. Who are you going to be bringing forward for the meeting?
Yeah, so Fred Davey, who is the head of the Civilian Complaint Authority in New York City, he's going to join us on the 28th. I think he had intended to join us tonight, but his body is meeting right now, so he wasn't able to make it. But I think he has some helpful perspective to offer. And then also I had had a conversation with our liaisons about potentially having some to do some presentations on some of those programs and software that I mentioned, because I really do think it would be helpful for not just for us but for the community to really get a sense of that, because I really I think obviously we're taking a hard look at some of these things, but I think a lot of it is telling the story of what is going as well. I know we all share that view. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was, if our two interns, if they could take a second and just introduce themselves briefly to everyone, and just maybe say a couple words about why you're interested in this work, I think that'd be great.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't know our interns were present. Go ahead, guys.
My name is Shelby Stevens. I'm a senior at the University of Akron. So I still have this semester and next semester left, but I am studying sociology, criminology, and law enforcement, and I have a certificate in conflict management. So this kind of project is what I'm really passionate about and kind of the work that I would like to do after I graduate as well. So that's why I'm interested in this project. I'm very excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your willingness to help. Okay, where's the other intern?
Hello, my name is Trayvon Richardson. I'm also a senior here at the University of Akron. I will be graduating this December with my bachelor's in criminology, and I also have a certificate in conflict management. I think that everything that this committee is doing right now is perfect with everything that's going on in the US. So hopefully in December we can make some changes, and I'm just very happy to be a part of helping. So thank you.
Okay, and thank you for joining us and your enthusiasm as well. And I just love that we have students from the University of Akron, my alma mater. But so thank you. We'll be hearing more from you guys, and hopefully be putting you to task and giving you some assignments that you can help bring forward some additional information in some of our upcoming meetings. All right. Thank you, Trayvon. Okay. I just wanted to say, Lieutenant Brown, are you still there?
I am, yes.
Okay. what I would like to do probably before we get into the heavy lifting, like next week, if you could kind of do some digging for me for a question about policies and procedures and what situations prompt the APD to create and or revise new policies and procedures. For some reason, the foundation or the fundamentals are important to me as to what governs that structure, be it, state mandated, how does it evolve, and where does it start, and how does it come to the municipalities, and what does it look like when it does. So if you could take that and make something out of it. I know I just kind of threw something up against the wall and hope it sticks. Hopefully you could come back with some information. I know that you were instrumental in devising some policies and procedures. So I'd like to hear more about that. But if you can get someone to share with you something about that, then that would be great for next week.
Yeah,
And
I should be able to talk about that topic on myself. So I won't need to bring
Okay.
anybody in since I led that committee that updated all of our procedures.
Okay. So you're going to be starting out next week, and then we'll get to the other part of our agenda. Okay.
I'll be ready.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anything else for the good of the order, guys? Is anyone still there?
Councilwoman Baylor. So in a few weeks, again, I have a ward meeting, so I'm on board from 5 to 6:15.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, then. So with that being said, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks.
thank you.